So, what's going on as a consequence in journalism right now? Well, one trend that's clear is that that news organizations and the media culture generally are focusing somewhat more on pushing content out into that great stream of people hunting for information and not just trying to bring people in. What do I mean by that? If you went to the New York Times website 2 years ago, 3 years ago, what you would have found there was entirely the New York Times content. Now, when you go to the New York Times content, you are going to see all kinds of things. You can even get to the Washington Post through the New York Times. And the New York Times is very, very interested in getting its content out into other places. The notion that you can simply, that you'll prevail as a business and in the marketplace by getting people to come to your website and then selling advertising against it, people recognize that's not really how the internet works. How many of you here have received an email in the last week from someone, or have sent an email in the last week to someone that had a story link in it? You said, this is something interesting you might want to read. Raise your hand. Okay. I'd say more than half the room. And by the way, we had people of all different ages raising their hands. If I send you a story link, I am now I'm not bringing you to necessarily somebody's website. And the front page of the New York Times website is not the front page that you entered the site on. You entered the site on the link that you sent to somebody. So the notion that you want to drive people to your website it isn't enough. The reason that the New York Times got rid of its paywall, what it called Times Select, was that it discovered that two-thirds of the traffic to the New York Times was coming through links, emails, search engine, and activity like that. Only 1/3 were people going to the New York Times. And so this notion that you want to push that content out into that big stream, into that 2/3, is a major shift in media culture. Another major trend is the idea of partnership. I mentioned that now we can get to the Washington Post via the New York Times. What this also means is that as you cut your as news organizations cut their newsrooms, reduce their staff, my old newspaper, the LA Times, has half the staff that it had when I was there. Half. It means that you cannot cover the waterfront anymore. The concept that people are using now is do what you do best and borrow the rest. The idea that you come to the New York Times or any news organization and say, this is what we do. Look, we're the best. People would say, you know what? I don't care how good you are. You're not as good as the accumulated universe of everything I can get on the internet. So if your website is a cul-de-sac, a dead end, a place where when I go there, I can't go anywhere else, I have to back up to go somewhere else, that's not so useful. Your website should be a place that not only has whatever you do best, but gives me the best of everything else. So that what this implies also is that aggregation and search and taking other people's stuff and giving sort of the greatest hits of everybody else's stuff, that is now part of journalism. My old company, many years ago, in the late 90s or right around the beginning of the new century, was offered a chance to buy a company that was in that business. And they said, you know what, we're not, search and aggregation isn't journalism. So no thank you, we don't want to buy Google. I don't think Google would have become Google had the Times Mirror Company owned it, but they had, the Google guys wanted to get rid of it so they could go back to Stanford and get their PhDs. Oh man, what would have happened if that happened? Another trend that's going on is that power is shifting away from the institution to some extent to the individual journalists. Now for the fellows who are here, many of whom are probably freelancers, and if they're not, they may soon be freelancers. This is a very tantalizing prospect. When we do something at the project. We do a lot of content analysis at my institute. It's a bad habit that I get into, and I've gotten kind of good at it. So we analyze 55 news outlets every day, and we also analyze blogs and social media. And what we see is that what the blogs and social media are doing is often going to specific people. So that Paul Krugman or David Brooks are very important in social media. More important, perhaps, than the newspaper they work for. And they continue to be important if they left that newspaper, probably, if they had someplace to publish. The former editor of the New Republic now has his own blog. A variety of people who are prominent journalists simply produce material and are important. When you who've been emailing stories to one another are emailing, I suspect that oftentimes it's people that you regularly read and you want to share their insights. This is the power of the individual journalist. There's a website that's being developed in Boston called Global Voices. The concept behind Global Voices is as newspapers cut back on foreign correspondents, Global Voices is hiring those foreign correspondents, giving each of them a stipend of $1,000 a month. They're overseas in whatever country they used to be reporting from for a newspaper. And they say, with that $12,000 a year we're giving you, that's a basis for you to, and we'll be an outlet for you. If you can cobble together a few of those things, you can stay overseas and continue to be a foreign correspondent. So it's essentially the model that's developed for photographers who take pictures and work on contract with many different places and own their own pictures and then distribute them through services like Global Magna and things like that. That model is just beginning to develop for our correspondents themselves, not just the photographers. These are early trends that we're seeing.